Gavin Newsom can do is basically go on an extended PR campaign, and that's all that he's been doing on social media by responding and picking a fight basically with Elon Musk, who's trying to expose a lot of this. But let's welcome in Chris Woodward, who is a reporter here at American Family News, for more information on the latest. So, Chris, where do we stand with all of this that is going on in California?
Yeah, one thing here, thank you for having me, but if you were to look up the word discombobulated now in the dictionary, you would see pictures of the California fires, Gavin Newsom, the mayor, the fire department chief, a whole bunch of people, because this literally is a series of confused, disoriented chaos that we're watching here in Los Angeles. Talking about the finger pointing, it also reminds me of that meme where there's like several Spider-Man or Spider-Men standing around pointing the finger at one another. That is literally what they have done since last Tuesday.
Yeah, is it Spider-Mans or Spider-Men? I don't know what the plural of Spider-Man is. That's something else we need.
I don't know what their pronouns are, so we can say whatever we want.
Valid, absolutely true. But I think that the thing that beyond just looking at the confusion and the destruction, and it's so incredibly sad, tragedies like this that are preventable and at least the damage can be mitigated when that is so poorly handled. That I think infuriates so many people. And so why hasn't the mayor of LA and Gavin Newsom responded at all to the calls from even celebrities in their own states asking for answers of what happened?
Yeah, I think one of the, and this is something that happens to a number of politicians, office holders, really around the country, across both sides of the aisle. I think they are oftentimes too worried about their image that they oftentimes want to just put it off on someone else and at least give them some time for that reporter to leave and start asking, let's say, the mayor about what Gavin Newsom says, and it'll give him time with his team to come up with the next excuse the next time they stick a camera or a microphone in front of his face. I think a lot of times legacy impacts a lot of decisions here, and they don't want to say what they need to do and really kind of take the blame here. I do think this was something where the state and local officials failed the people, regardless of income, regardless of celebrity status. They clearly were not prepared for something like this, even if they have training exercises and things like that. Maybe they binge watch Fire Country on CBS. They weren't prepared for something like this, which is really disappointing considering that it's California and fires happen on a regular basis based on things like dry conditions and high winds.
Yeah, I mean this would be the same thing as here in the state of Florida because we get hurricanes. That's just part of the climate here. If Governor DeSantis wasn't ready and prepared, and a lot of people during the primary and during some of the and even during some of the issues in the general election, when he stepped away from advocating against Amendment 3 and 4 to go and actually do his job, and he managed that so effectively. I mean, obviously he can't prevent hurricanes, but the state can still be prepared, and I think that contrast is what a lot of people are seeing between good management versus the PR self-serving kind of government leadership that's in California. But I want to ask you about this as well, Chris Woodward, who is a reporter over at American Family News, and you can get all of the news from a Christian biblical worldview perspective over there. I also write a column out every Friday generally for AFN, so you can always look at that there. But Gavin Newsom is on his PR campaign, and he posted this on X just a couple of days ago. I guess that would have been on Saturday. A lot of misinformation out there. Just launched a new site to ensure the public has access to fact-based data around the Southern California wildfires. The truth, according to Newsom, California did not cut our firefighting budget. We have nearly doubled the size of our firefighting army and built the world's largest aerial firefighting fleet. California has increased forest management tenfold since we took office. California will not allow for looting. And then he posts to this website. Well, first of all, that's not really answering anything. But second, Libs of TikTok has been all up in his replies, posting as Kellyanne Conway might have said, alternative facts, but showing and saying, this just isn't accurate. And, that last thing, California will not allow for looting. I mean, isn't this the same state where you can go in and as long as it's under $500, you can just walk out with it? I mean, that's kind of looting as well. I mean, this is just utterly absurd.
It really is. It screams to me damage control. The only thing missing from his social media post there was "let us be clear" and full stop, because that's what they often say when they try to put out something. They also really try to get ahead of the misinformation stuff now. Anything that makes them look bad as misinformation or something phobic. So that's it. It seems to me that it is damage control. If all of that stuff was true, this would have been this story would have been wrapped up by Friday, and you and I would be talking about something different today, possibly. But clearly, they were not prepared from the state offices down to the local stuff. And meanwhile, the local fire department is being hammered because they have things like DEI policies. And I know that there were stories late last week or maybe on Saturday that the fire chief had been suspended based on her criticism of the mayor and some other stuff. However, CBS and a few other news outlets have now reported that that's not true. The fire department chief is still there. This fire department itself, locally, did look like it was favoring certain recruits over others in terms of training. They were offering incentives to try to bring in people that, quote, looked like the fire victims. That's the words that was used by the deputy chief, Christine Larson, in a video that you might have seen here. Christine Larson is also the head of the Equity and Human Rights Bureau there at LAFD, and she has defended DEI policies and went so far as to say, if you can't get the victim out, don't worry about it. It's the victim's fault for being in that position, which is a horrible thing to say. And talking about the comments there, people at Young America's Foundation ripped LAFD for those comments and policies, saying no one cares what the guy or gal coming to rescue them from the fire looks like. They just want to get out of the fire. And really, that's an insult to firefighters nationwide, saying that they only care about the sexual choices or skin colors of victims. They don't. Their main objective in any fire, from California to Connecticut, is to get the victim out. They don't care about that person and their lifestyle choices. So really, they not only insulted sane people in Los Angeles, but everybody nationwide when you make silly comments like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I did see that video of, a woman who was responding saying, well, the other question I get asked as a female firefighter, what if you can't carry someone out of the fire, something to that effect, and responded basically just blaming the victim and saying, well, if I can't carry the person out, then it's their fault that they're in that situation to begin with, which is utterly, I mean, this would be like a doctor in an ER saying, well, if I don't know the medicine and I can't save them, it's their fault for being in that situation to begin with. I mean, the same thing for any kind of first responder, including medical personnel. You don't care. I mean, I wouldn't care what my surgeon looked like, or age or race, or anything like that. I just care that they can competently do their job, and they do that without favor in any way or discrimination. I mean, that's all part of the Hippocratic Oath. I mean, and so when you have the emphasis on DEI, it muddies the waters, and then it also raises up people to these jobs that can't actually perform their jobs. And that's where we get into the danger, because people need these first responders to be able to effectively do their job. So in just the last few minutes we have with you, Chris Woodward, and I appreciate your reporting and your commentary. President Trump is set to retake office a week from today, high noon on January 20th, which is per the U.S. Constitution. And a lot of people on the left, of course, are already, I mean, he hasn't even taken office yet, and they're blaming him like he should be doing something more. But, Gavin Newsom can sit there on X and nobody cares on the left. What, if anything, has Trump said about, day one in terms of just addressing some of these issues that should be a state and local problem, but obviously he cares, and obviously this is still and likely will be as of next week an ongoing crisis.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific in front of me in terms of like an actual quote from him or somebody that's going to be in the press office there, but It's clearly an issue, and they want to show that they do care about California. I know Gavin Newsom in the last couple of days did try to say, we're really worried that Trump's going to deny us federal funds, which is, again, a deflection, an attempt at deflection on Newsom's part to make Trump the bad guy here. Clearly, it's an issue. Trump is aware of it. He obviously watches the newscast, despite what he may tell somebody. I do think they're going to offer them some assistance. They will fly people out there. Certainly, they'll offer up federal funds, as any president would do. I know Biden's already said, they're going to help out in the waning days of his presidency. So we will see something quick. But the big news items really, once he takes office, will be executive orders on things like immigration and probably to do some changes in the way of energy policy. So the reason I bring that up is because the mainstream media is going to focus on things like immigration ahead of what's expected to be a mass deportation policy from Trump and Mr. Homan, the border czar. And therefore, a lot of people may think Trump doesn't care about the California fires, and that's really just based on the fact that the mainstream media will cover the bulk of executive orders on immigration and drilling and make it look as if he's not said or done anything on the fires, even though he has. So people probably need to do their homework and really just kind of Google or whatever web search they might use to figure out what exactly he has done for Trump or for fire victims, because I guarantee you he is going to help.
Well, and people can definitely go to American Family News as well. Chris Woodward, thanks so much for dropping by this morning, and we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
This is Bible League International with an urgent plea. Christian persecution in the 20th and 21st centuries exceeds all previous 19. That tells you that we're addressing what is arguably the number one issue facing the global church. Christians are paying a heavy price simply for believing Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. This woman in South Africa was hated by her family now that she's come to Christ, but here's her reaction when she finally got her own Bible.
We were in Mpumalanga. The lady there, she knelt down and she cried. At the age of 60, she never had a Bible.
AFR listeners, you're putting tears of joy on the faces of Bible-less persecuted believers all over the world. You've done that for thousands. We have to wrap up January 31st. The need is so great. So please, at $5 a Bible, $50 sends 10, $500 sends 100. Would you pray about it and then call 800-YES-WORD, 800-YES-WORD, or give it sendbiblesnow.org. Sendbiblesnow.org. Would you do it by January 31st? And God bless you for caring.
This Sanctity of Life Month, we honor the over 66 million babies whose lives have been tragically ended through abortion since Roe v. Wade. But in the midst of all of this darkness, there is a light that shines, and that's Preborn. Preborn's network of clinics have rescued over 300,000 babies from abortion and have prayed with over 80,000 women to come to Christ.
When I heard her heartbeat, I decided to keep her. And now my daughter's about to be 3. I don't know where my life would be without her.
An ultrasound doubles a baby's chance at life. Please join Preborn in protecting life. One ultrasound session costs $28, and $140 will sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Any gift will help. $100, $200, $1,000. To donate securely, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/AFR. Your love can save a life.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Stern. Stand by for news and commentary next. The Edison Township Council in New Jersey has banned citizens from having American flags, copies of the U.S. Constitution, or other props at meetings. A citizen who objected to the new rules was told by Council President Nish Patel he was in violation, ordered police to remove the guy from the council chamber. Patel told the Edison Reporter that any props will be considered not conducive to good order, and as the president, he gets to make the call. Now, the good news is the citizens of Edison are fighting back. The Republican chairperson said banning the flag from council meeting goes beyond normal political discourse between parties and would be destructive to their diverse community. She also said it's absurd, and it is absurd. Fortunately, there's a simple remedy for the un-American activities of the town council. Either let citizens wave Old Glory or return every single penny of federal tax money. I'm Todd Stearns.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we're talking still about the incompetent leadership in California, and this is, dare I say it and use a leftist term, a systemic problem throughout the country with Democrats and leftists when they are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion and spending their time and resources implementing policy that not only fails but undermines good policy that is actually geared toward getting their job done. And so with the emphasis on this, it raises the question that Dave Rubin, who's a podcaster here in Florida, actually answered really well. He went on another podcast. This was posted actually by Elon Musk on X. That's how I saw it. But it's in part shared from a TikTok video talking about how the founders got it right when they established the federal government to do very minimal things, and it should come down to the state and local government to do all of the practical policy elements, but that's it. We don't need to have all of this DEI, leftist, ridiculous policy and worldview embedded in the functioning of government. So here's what Dave Rubin had to say. This is cut 2.
2 years ago, Hurricane Ian demolished Southwest Florida. Immediately after the hurricane, everybody on the news was saying to rebuild the Sanibel Causeway, which is about 4 miles, was going to take 3 years. That's what everybody was saying. DeSantis basically had it rebuilt in a month because he brought all the best contractors down. He took everybody to the bridge and basically said, what do we need to do? We gave him our recommendations, and he started making it happen the next day. That's proper, competent governance. We're just so not used to that. We're used to what you fled in California, an ever-growing state that taxes endlessly and punishes people for success. And then it's like, how is it that I have nice, clean roads in Florida? How is it that we don't have homeless people? Why do things work with no income tax in Florida? And why does Cali tax the high hell out of you and have much worse services and much worse infrastructure and a whole series of other problems? So the government shouldn't do much. Everything should be dealt with at the state and local level. And then the federal government should have a couple things that they're supposed to do. So that would be border, make sure the states aren't warring with each other, interstate commerce, foreign policy. I would say the founders basically got it completely right.
So let's welcome in our good friend Steve Deace, host of the Steve Deace Show on The Blaze. And Steve, I think Dave Rubin is absolutely right, but this raises the question, do people on the right, do conservatives even understand that going into a new Trump administration of limited government and actually wanting Trump and the new administration to just do the business of government and nothing else?
Well, the founders got it right. Going back to Dave's clip, I think we have to actually go back to what Dave Rubin says in that clip. The founders got it right because they were permitted to in the culture that they came from. They are within a generation of great awakenings. Christianity is the driving influence and impulse of the culture. To the point, one of the first official acts of the U.S. Congress was commissioning Geneva Bibles for the rest of the country. So you have a people that understands that ultimately they are under the jurisdiction of whom James Madison referred to as the governor of the universe, God. We cannot do what Dave articulates there without God. It's not possible. We cannot self-govern without God. It's not possible. Human nature in a fallen state has its limits. And what happens when we abandon all of that and start with the premise that human nature is basically good and extend that to the premise that there is a realm called the secular. There is a realm that God does not exist or have jurisdiction that is meant only for us, which is another way of saying, ye be like God. Once we do those two things, what's happened next in the country, Jenna, is inevitable. And we're not debating processes anymore. And we're not debating personalities anymore. You're debating core philosophy. I mean, Ron DeSantis is a better manager than Gavin Newsom. Not because he went to the Wharton School of Business, Trump did, but not because he went to the Wharton School of Business, got 36 PhDs, and built an empire from the ground up, managing thousands of employees and millions of shares. Didn't do any of that. In fact, his career path, other than his military career, very similar to Gavin Newsom's. He spent way more time in the public sector than anywhere else. The difference is in worldview. He's not smarter than Gavin Newsom. He has a different worldview. He has a worldview that makes human dignity of preeminent worth, that we're made in the likeness and image of God. Therefore, his governing philosophies will drive that worldview premise. And that's what's made him more effective. The other guy doesn't have that, right? So the other guy is driven by his worldview. And in any Marxist worldview, ideology trumps human worth every single time. And so this is why there has to be DEI, ESG, environmental, wacko regulations. The ideology has to take precedence even over the tragedy. Whether you're dealing with Stalin's 5-year plan 100 years ago, or you're dealing with the fires in LA, in Marxism, ideology trumps human worth and dignity. To whom much is given, or for each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Okay? We can't escape worldview. It is destiny. The true fight on the right in this Trump era is going to be among those who realize that, and then those who don't. That those who think that, well, we can do all the same things they did, but put our people in charge. I mean, when I log on X this morning, the amount of people I see on the right who are just beyond crushed and disappointed that they were let down by atheist Sam Harris during a time of moral courage indicates this. The godlessness in the West has seeped into the right. The idea that the founding fathers simply could not have articulated this kind of governing vision outside of a Christian worldview. It would not have been permitted. It was not permitted anywhere in the world prior to the United States of America, founded by literally Christians, Puritans. It could not function anywhere in the world outside of a Christian biblical moral worldview framework, and it won't. And it won't in our era either.
Yeah, it's so well said, and this is why a biblical, truthful worldview does matter, and why we on the right can't just advocate for our preferences and policies and have it come down to sort of a blunt force power struggle, because we're then conceding a secular humanist ideological playing field rather than keeping the moral high ground to say, this isn't just my thought or your thought, Steve. This is the reality to which God has presented us. This is the true condition of man. This is the accurate, truthful worldview of things like basic biology, like there are only two genders and you can't change them. You're not assigned one at birth. God has created you uniquely and distinctly. That includes your immutable characteristic. I mean, all of these things that are fundamental, basic assumptions going into policy matter. And if we approach this as those things are negotiable or even arguable, I think then we've lost over, especially the last 10 years, we have lost then that argument because we're participating in those arguments.
I mean, everything that Dave says in the video clip is spot on, 100% correct. And his instincts are right. But and I love Dave to death, and I've known him for years, but he's diagnosing symptoms here. We actually have to go to the disease. And the disease is godlessness. The disease is we're under a Romans 1 judgment. And we have said, we're going to go our own way here, Fleetwood Mac. We're going to do this our way. We got this. And like if God, as he does in Romans 1, has said, okay, you got it then, I guess. Have it your way, Burger King. That's the disease. And we are not going to be able to replace processes of godlessness with just the Constitution is not in a it's like John Adams said, it's meant only for a moral and religious people. Okay, it's not a sacred argument. It's the itemization and quantification of a social compact, and that's the other problem that we have is that at least half of this country, or almost half of this country, doesn't want to abide by that social compact anymore. So I don't believe that we should therefore hold ourselves accountable to a social compact that the other side of the marriage won't, because that's just a suicide pact. Okay, so that's the other problem we have is we have another group of people on the right who want to say, well, we have to abide by the unwritten rules and the honored, cherished traditions and the distinctions and the spirit of the law. Otherwise, we're terrible humans, and while the other side is just over there shredding whatever is absolutely left of the letter of the law. This is going to be a very messy process. The only thing that's going to be harder for President Trump than winning this last election, Jenna, is going to be governing. The only thing that's going to be harder than building the coalition it took to win this election will be maintaining it. Because you already have seen it over H-1B visas and the last budget fight. You had these very well-known conservative influencers, the Hodge twins, get into a Twitter fight with J.D. Vance just this morning over J6 prisoners. And I think these things are actually all very healthy, but they're also going to be dangerous because on the right, we have not been serious about governing for about 30 years. I'd argue really since after the first 6 months of the takeover of the Congress with the Contract with America was really the last time that the right collectively was serious about governing the country. And so we have a lot of differences on our side that have largely been papered over while we had to own the libs, beat the Democrats, save America, all those cliches. Some of them are even true. Well, now notice the Democrats are pretty quiet. I mean, frankly, in my line of work, we're trying to come up with stuff to clickbait off of because they're like, okay, let's see how these guys actually run the country with the slimmest of majorities and everything else. And I think it's going to be a real challenge on the right to come up with a cohesive, unifying message of how to affirmatively run the government and how to affirmatively govern a country. We have been great at being a minority party for decades, not so great at being a ruling one. And the country needs us to be right now. And you sort of get the sense after this last election that this might be the last chance the country gives us to show that we can do it. So it's on.
Yeah. So well said. And I could not agree more that it's so much easier to just point out the problems of the other side and be basically the opposition party in the minority and, go on the Fox News hits when, you're a member of Congress rather than actually do the business of governing. That's a lot harder. And especially when, as you mentioned rightly, Steve, we don't have the cohesive base of morality as a culture. And even among the right, I mean, speaking of Dave Rubin, for example, and I don't know him nearly as well as you do. I've met him, a couple times and have had him on my show previously. But, just as an example, and this isn't, meant to be a, let's just go out and criticize Dave Rubin comment, but just as an example, because we're talking about him and he's very right on those kinds of things. He's right in everything that he said, but he himself lives an openly homosexual lifestyle. And those two things, coming from California as a former Democrat, all of those things, it's like he's getting it right, but he's missing the piece of biblical morality and following through. And so you see an inherent conflict in that when you want all of the benefits of the blessings of liberty without the hard work of actually submitting to what the God of the universe says about human beings, about salvation, about the Christian life, and about civil society, and just about basic morality. And I think that, as an example of the fundamental conflict within the right, really we are going to have to contend with this, especially over the next 2 and 4 years, as the right determines how do we actually govern now that we have the trifecta that we haven't since Trump's first 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's 1 year. I mean, I think much has to be done this 1 year, this first year here, this year, to ensure we don't lose 40 House seats next year and the Senate and Trump becomes officially a lame duck the very next day. Okay, so this first year, and I think Trump understands this. I mean, looking at he's been much more aggressive in putting a government together than he was his first time around, much more hands-on on issues than he's ever been the whole time that he's been a national figure. So I think he understands that there's really a one-year window here. But on the day front, you make a very good point. I like to say on my show, no one can rise above their own worldview. The issue to me isn't so much Dave's sin pattern. We all have a sin pattern. That's why we all need a savior. The issue really for the right is that even though he's limited by his own worldview is limited by his public sin pattern, he still gets it way more than many on the right actually do. See what I'm trying to say? That's the problem. The problem is when Elon Musk's and Dave Rubin, who are making this transition from being, Dave Rubin used to be a young Turk, for goodness sakes. Okay, so when these folks are making this transition ideologically and they're new to this, let me give you an analogy. Okay, Western Europe is gone. All right, the countries that founded Western civilization, that brought it here to the Americas, okay, that our white European ancestors are mostly from, okay, Western Europe is largely gone. All right. If you went to the countries that were the former Soviet bloc countries, where there is still a living generation there that remembers what Marxism and totalitarianism and statism was like, it's way more active than it is in Western Europe because they are new. They still remember what the old evil was like. Now they're new to this. They don't have the cultural infrastructure in those countries. The church has been underground for so long, as opposed to what could still be out in the open in the Western European countries. They don't have the infrastructure to lead a European revival. So it's not so much that they're new to this and don't understand. It's that the nations that are old to this and should understand quit. And you see what I'm trying to say? That's where we are. We're being led by people like Dave Rubin and Elon Musk because there's no church corporately in America willing to do its job.
You hit the nail on the head there, Steve. Absolutely. I mean, this is why you can't just be a conservative. You have to have the church and salvation and the full biblical worldview if we really want to be a moral and upright society. And this is why you should be a Christian first.
At least, Jenna, enough of us do. Heck, some of us do. Okay. Almost none of us do. Okay. And so right now, Dave and Elon and Donald Trump are about the best we can do. I mean, the idea that turning over the education system to demons for 2 generations and having the church be more worried about peddling wares and dudes in Hawaiian shirts year round, even in January, okay, in the North, and skinny jeans and sweater vests and their church growth patterns, and building a bunch of Pottery Barn-esque Taj Mahals and evangelical monasteries in the suburbs. The idea that we were just going to do this and it was eventually not going to have a generational reckoning, it's just not how this works. And we're in that reckoning now. And so we don't have the spiritual corporately, but for every Jack Hibbs, there's 50 other evangelical ministers, frankly, that aren't worth the paper they're printed on. So we're in this era right now where, there's a void, and that the void of opposition to statism is going to be filled with something. And right now it's being filled better by Dave Rubin for all of his faults and Elon Musk for all of his than it is corporately by the church in America. And that's a problem because they're going to get it, but they're not, because they've also been on the other side more recently than us, but they're not going to fully have the worldview it takes to defeat what they actually get.
And so well said, Steve Deace. And this is exactly why we need the church over the next, especially year. This is the key opportunity for the church in 2025 to speak the truth and to fill that void and give the missing piece to the people who genuinely want to see this country succeed. And funny you mentioned Jack Hibbs. He actually just texted me a reel from yesterday morning from his Sunday service where he didn't hold back on scolding California and Democrat leadership. This was posted by my friend David Harris Jr. on his Instagram feed. If listeners want to go and see that about 3-minute clip, really great. And where do you, in just the last 2 minutes we have with you, where do you see the church then being the most effective at this key moment of opportunity to speak the truth and to connect all of these dots?
The church needs to evangelize the right in America badly. And most of your evangelical suburban megachurch pastors don't want to do that. I don't get a cover on Christianity Never magazine for doing that. Maybe those people aren't the big tithers that the wine moms in the suburbs with their beta male husbands are. Okay, but the church needs to evangelize the right in America badly, needs to reach young men in America badly. If there's a limited window to do that right now. If they don't do that, then they're going to sentence this country to a French Revolution style uprising, which everybody knows the history of that, I hope, was terrible. And Andrew Tate will become the Pope of young men in the West. That's what will happen.
Yeah, so well said. I was just thinking about that controversy. We'll talk about that a little bit more and then get to some other things on the other side of the break. But Steve, always so appreciate your wisdom and discernment and for coming on the show. So thanks so much. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
As a nurse, I primarily work with children who are abused and exploited in trafficking, and I frequently see very unfair situations. We must talk about the issue of abuse. We can't base our actions on fear. We have to be faith-informed in what we do.
The Dr. Nurse Mama Show. For more from Dr. Jessica Peck, tune in at 2 p.m. Central on American Family Radio or on the podcast page at afr.net.
To all of our friends on American Family Radio, this is Michael Brown, thrilled to announce to you that we have a brand new 30-minute daily equipping broadcast that will light a fresh fire in your life and will infuse you with faith and truth and courage to help you stand strong in the Lord. It's coming your way, 12:30 every single night, 5 days a week. Don't miss a single broadcast on the Line of Fire. I believe your life will be changed.
He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. When my wife and I first started having children, we discouraged our family members from speaking to them in baby talk. You know, the gaga goo-goo stuff. The reason was simple. We wanted our children to speak English well. Baby talk would hinder that development. The same principle applies to spiritual development. If we want our children to be wise disciples of our Lord, we should ask ourselves how much of their time is spent investing in spiritual maturity. Protracted time in the company of spiritual baby talkers will inevitably cause harm.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Are you tired of all the un-Christ-like stuff out there today? Great. I am too. But let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the good, Christ-affirming resources, educational material, and family entertainment available at the AFA Resource Center. From encouraging and conversation starters, shirts and sweatshirts, to good Christian books by your very own AFA staff. At the AFA Resource Center, you can even find Christian documentaries and lesson plans. With DVDs like The God Who Speaks and materials from the AFA Cultural Institute, the Resource Center is a great place for materials for you, your friends, or your church. But really, if you're tired of unsubstantial, un-Christ-like stuff, you should check out the Resource Center. Find it at resources.afa.net. That's resources.afa.net. Don't settle for a distracted culture, but set your mind on things above. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And just before the break and the end of the interview with Steve Deace, he mentioned Andrew Tate. And I just want to say real quickly before we get to our next topic and our next guest, we're going to cover this a lot more tomorrow, and I think that we need to and kind of unpack this whole situation a lot more because there's a lot more implications. And if you don't know who Andrew Tate is, just very briefly, as an online influencer who tries to teach young men specifically how to succeed in the world, but has a lot of terrible baggage in his own background, and again, there's a lot to unpack here. But basically, he's trying to teach young men that the way to succeed is to dominate women, to have power and influence and money. And Nancy Pearcey, who's one of my favorite authors and actually a former professor of mine, posted this on X. A former graduate student of mine now teaches at a high school, and she sent me an email saying, all my male students are fans of Andrew Tate. They are even including quotes from Andrew Tate in the yearbook. I asked, where do you teach? At a classical Christian school. So Piercy goes on to say, even Christian young men are being drawn in by these online influencers if we do not offer them a healthy, attractive, biblical model of masculinity. And she's absolutely right about that. We have to offer the truth from the church, as Steve Deace was talking about. And this kind of came to a head because a very prominent online influencer personality, Benny Johnson, platformed Andrew Tate in a very kind of glowing interview that also featured Trump lawyer Alina Habba, who said that she was a fan of Andrew Tate. So this has kind of exploded. And like I said, I want to get into this a lot more tomorrow. So just in case you're wondering what Steve meant by that, this is an ongoing controversy that the church really does need to respond to, not just this instance, but I think holistically, where are the men and what actually defines biblical masculinity, the roles between men and women. I mean, all of these things are so incredibly important. But let's shift topics now because I want to welcome in our next guest, Robin Biro, who is a Democrat strategist, and get your response, Robin, to this piece from Politico yesterday, because when we're talking about the context of California, its failed leadership, and also the outfall of the 2024 election, which has resulted in the Republican trifecta, Politico, their headline is this: knives come out for the D.C. consultant class as Democrats search for a new leader. And of course, there's kind of the back and forth finger blaming on the Democrat side. But my question for you is, as you're talking among your fellow Democrat friends and the party and other leadership, where do the Democrats go from here when clearly the extreme left of the party, the cultural Marxists, people like Kamala, are being utterly rejected? And I know that you weren't a big fan of Kamala and weren't really promoting her anyway. So do you see the Democrats kind of coming back to a little bit more moderate of a position?
Jenna, I think the biggest problem that we had this cycle was the messaging. So Democrats, regardless whether they're farther to the left or somewhere in the center, they've got to get back on the message. James Carville so famously said in 1992, "It's the economy, stupid." We heard so very little of the economy. They were talking about all these wedge issues and social issues and abortion and things like that. Sure, these are issues that are a concern to Americans, but people are much more concerned with what's happening in their wallets and pocketbooks right now, and banking accounts. And the recession, the inflation affected us all. That was at least a unifier for us. But so it was a problem that we all needed to deal with. And one thing that they are arguing right now, the consultant class, because the consultant class totally got it wrong about what the issues were that Americans cared about. That's why they're having these explosive arguments with the consultant class in D.C. as far as the the chairmanship goes.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, clearly the consultant class on the left thought that people would be persuaded by Kamala's, fluff and joy and nothingness, other than, trying to usher in more of the socialist policies. And so where is the Democrat Party going from here in terms of leadership? Because then I'm seeing, Tim Walz, who is putting up David Hogg as if he's some kind of great leader as potentially the vice chairman of the DNC. I mean, that's not going to go over that well.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I got a text from just one of those random spam texts from David Hogg announcing that he was running for that, actually. So I guess that's to be taken seriously now. But, just looking at this field of 8 candidates right now for DNC chairman, only 2 names stood out. The others all were kind of forgettable to me. And the 2 that stood out the most were Marianne Williamson, who's often been dismissed as the crazy lady. She's, of course, a famous published author, and she's run for president twice and got very diminishing returns on both of those investments. But she's still out there and making a name for herself. But more importantly, Governor O'Malley, who used to be head of the Social Security Administration, that is a name I take seriously. He also ran for president. I had a friend who you probably know too. I can't remember her name right now, but she worked at Fox News, Democratic pundit who left to go work on his campaign for president. So, he's still out there in the mix. They rewarded Jamie Harrison with the position when he lost his race for Senate against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. But, we've got so much soul searching to do with the party and very little time. I don't have a lot of faith, Jenna, that they're going to get it right.
Well, what to you means getting it right? I mean, where do you see, somebody who's been part of the Democrat Party and very heavily involved and engaged, what would getting it right look like to you?
So getting it right, well, first of all, Jamie Harrison is a friend of mine. I've known him for more than 20 years. But one thing that I criticized him for was that he never took an office in D.C. He worked from South Carolina remotely the entire time. And I'm not going to say he did a bad job, but I think you need boots on the ground to really do the very best job that you can in that position. So number one, they need an office there. And not all of these 8 candidates have even pledged to be there. Some of them are saying that they're going to take a congressional kind of a schedule where they're only there for part of the year. No, this is a full-time job. You're being paid to do a full-time job. We need you in the office. Americans need to get back to work. They've got to talk about kitchen table issues. They must make the economy a number one priority and really get rid of a lot of these consultants because they've been getting it wrong. And pollsters, mind you. We've been paying pollsters for, I think they've been getting it wrong every time since 2012. And we still reward them with these big fat paychecks from the DNC, and I don't really understand why.
Well, that's not just a problem on the Democrat side, unfortunately. I think that's just a problem, overall in the political uniparty class. But I think especially, for my listeners who obviously are conservative and, Republican leaning, wondering, do you think that the leadership of the Democrat Party learned their lesson of actually what didn't work and why there was such a resounding rejection of Kamala Harris and the extreme leftists? Do you think that they get that, or are they just kind of making excuses like, well, the love and joy didn't work, but we're going to try this a different way next time?
I've always told you the truth. I'm a godly man. I tell the truth. So I'm going to tell you a hard truth, which is that we've not learned the lessons. If anything, anytime we have a loss, there's a part of the party that thinks that the reason why was because we weren't left enough. And those voices are usually the loudest ones in the room, unfortunately. And you can see that just with our Congress people, right? The ones that get the most attention are the squad members, the very loudest in the party. And that's what's happening again. So I'm encouraging my friends to really not just pray on it, but do pray on it, but call and take some action here too. Call your representatives of your county chairs because they have some influence about what happens with the national chairmanship. Do what you can and make sure that the party doesn't get hijacked by some of the far left fringe any more so than it already is, Jenna.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because that really signals kind of this upcoming squaring off between the Republican trifecta, the new Congress, and of course Trump coming back into the White House, and where the Democrat Party goes from here. And I think it's a good reminder to people who are listening who maybe live in Democrat districts or even blue states that you're still a constituent. And so it's not just about looking at what your team or the Republicans or the conservatives are doing, but if you live in those districts, you can still affect how they think, and you can still call them and say, listen, this is what didn't work, and have you guys gotten this understanding and awareness, and speak the truth to them. And so it's not just a matter of, if you're a registered Republican, then forgetting about what the Democrats are doing. I mean, certainly people in California are unfortunately learning that lesson the very, very hard way, and I'm very glad, Robin, to see, even a lot of these Hollywood celebrities who historically have been very Democrat coming out and questioning their leadership and saying, what's going on? Why are they not taking care of just, the fundamental needs of people that shouldn't be party or ideologically driven at all. So just in the last minute,
I'm doing hands of Jesus here. Bless you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And just in the last minute that we have here, who is your prediction then, or if you have one this early, for the DNC chair in terms of how that's going to go?
I think the most serious contender right now is Governor O'Malley, but I'm also, strangely enough, not dismissing Marianne Williamson because she is a spiritual person, and we need a spiritual reckoning right now in the DNC.
Interesting. Well, all of the crystals she may bring to the DNC. But Robin Biro, really appreciate that and your commentary. It's going to be interesting to see where the Democrat Party goes from here. That's all the time we have for Jenna Ellis in the morning. You can always reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net. We'll see you tomorrow morning.